and barrister with the CPS. I did my pupillage and finished last November, so I've been qualified for a few months now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Jade, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name's Jade and I'm a current pupil barrister. So I started my pupillage last year in March, so I'm set to qualify next month, and then I'll be a Crown Prosecutor like Ben.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for dedicating your time to be here with us. This has been a short notice. I was waiting for the announcement from the Crown Prosecution Service and it was fantastic timing. Like I said, the tickets were sold out within less than 24 hours, so I'm really grateful for your time here. Just quick reminders for everybody. Again, please keep yourselves on mute. If you have any questions, put them down in the chat. If you want to direct a question to a specific member of the panel, please state so in the chat box. Now we're going to move on now. So let's start off with Ben. Ben, tell us a bit about your journey to the bar and why you decided to go into the Crown Prosecution Service, and tell us on how it's going, please.
Yeah, so I'm Ben. I am from Liverpool, which is where I still live now. I was born and raised in Liverpool from, well, a non-traditional law background. And I went to university, did politics, philosophy and economics at Manchester. I'd never considered law as an option because where I came from, it was more something that you only knew of if you were needing a lawyer. But it was one of those things that I came across while I was at university. I was doing a lot about police powers in my dissertation, so I got quite into law and then looked into doing it, converted to law by doing the GDL in Manchester. Then I worked for 2 years doing personal injury law as a paralegal, which was thoroughly dull, but gave me some good experience. And then I did the bar practice training course at BPP in Manchester with Middle Temple. I was called to the bar and I got pupillage with the Crown Prosecution Service that year. So it was all pretty much one summer and then straight into it. I started in November of 2020. Then COVID came just as I was getting on my feet. So getting on my feet was a strange experience because there weren't too many courts going out as there's sort of in the middle of it. I'm sure for Jade, I know people who started when she did and they didn't even get to go to court at first. So it could have been worse. And then I qualified in November and now I am in court pretty much every day.
Fantastic, and that's really great because you didn't come from the usual route of the LLB, so it's fantastic to have you again. Jade, would you please tell us a bit about your journey? So why did you decide to become a barrister, and why the Crown Prosecution Service, and how is it going for you?
So my journey is that I live in Southeast London, which is where I grew up, and I went to the University of Greenwich and I did an LLB degree. I was originally going to do history, but my mum told me to do law, so I just did it. And then I did a master's afterwards because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought about doing the bar, but then I also thought about doing the LPC. So I was really indecisive and I just did a master's to kill time. So I did my master's at Greenwich. Finished, then I started working for a year, and then whilst I was working I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I was working in recruitment, so it was completely different from law, and then I last minute kind of decided that if I want to do the bar I have to do it now, because the more time passes the less motivated that I was going to get to do it. So I took the plunge and I applied to an in of court within I think like 3 days. I think the deadline is like May 31st and I sent my papers off like May 29th. So did it so last minute, went to BPP, self-funded everything because I obviously missed the scholarship deadlines and everything. So I did my PTC at BPP full-time, 2018 to 2019. And then I got called to the bar in November. And then I applied for the CPS pupillage and luckily got it. I think they don't normally open in November, but for some reason they did. So I applied, got it, and I started in March 2020. I think what drew me to the CPS was that I started as a paralegal assistant. Luckily, when I finished my law, my BPTC, because I needed a job, they opened up and I got it and it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. And then I applied for pupillage just because I thought, why not? If they've opened it, I'll see how it goes. And luckily I got it and it all worked out. And I think also what applied to me was the employed bar. Being self-employed, as exciting as it is, because that is what the majority of barristers are, they're self-employed, it terrifies me. I like steady income. So I liked the fact that I could be a barrister and have a stable income. When I get older, for instance, and have children, go off on maternity leave, come back to a stable job and stable career. So that really appealed to me as well. And also criminal law is one of the fields that I really, really liked. So that's also why I picked it. And currently, like Ben, it's going good. It is really stressful and intense. I started on my feet in September, and it was crazy because we weren't allowed to shadow in court as much as possible. So I was kind of going in not knowing what was happening. Luckily, was able to just pick up things quickly on my feet. And like Ben, I'm in court like 5 days a week. And so it's very intense, but I'm in a better position than others. So I don't want to complain at all. So that's my journey to the bar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, it is stressful. We will totally know that. That's the route we're all going down, unfortunately, but I know it's eventually rewarding. So thank you for sharing, Jade. Now, before we head off to the questions and answers, I'll just ask one question I think that everybody is eager to find out the answer to, and I'll direct it to Ben first, and then I'll ask the same question to Jade. Now, what is the legal trainee scheme? I have had that question come through in my direct messages and emails, and asking me, what is the legal trainee scheme and how do I qualify as a barrister from doing the legal trainee scheme with the Crown Prosecution Service? Ben, would you like to go first, please?
Yeah, so the scheme, it operates largely how a pupillage would operate for the most part. You know, it's divided into your first 6 where you're non-practicing, and then your second 6 when you're on your feet. It's a year, same as for everyone else. There's a few sort of more varied parts of it in terms of you'll do some out of court work a bit more. So you'll be doing stuff like charging on cases, which we'll have a look at. So like when the police get cases, essentially the police can charge the sort of low level summary only, but when there is more serious matters, they get sent to the CPS. So you get a look at those things and you'll get a chance with charging and stuff. I did a bit of it in my first 6, none of it anymore. I'm just in court now. Then also you do a secondment where you go to chambers essentially as part of getting the bar's certification for becoming a barrister. They like it if you've experienced self-employed life and if you've got a bit of variety. So it's the same, you know, it's to say, you know, I'm more varied. I could be a self-employed barrister. I've seen what that's like. I've got that experience. So I did a month with Harrington Street Chambers in Liverpool. So I did some family law work, some civil law work, and that was really good. But then your second 6 is largely the same. I have friends who are in chambers in Liverpool and they do criminal law, and essentially we were doing the same thing in terms of just in court all of the time. So it's a pupillage by a different name, essentially.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that's what people needed to hear, because like I said, I had a lot of people asking me the same question, and you know, do I qualify as a barrister? Can I still become a barrister after that year? Would I need to do pupillage with a private firm? So I think that was really important to establish that. And Jade, I would ask you the same thing. I mean, just can you just simplify to us what is pupillage, and also do you get paid when you're doing the legal trainee scheme? And yeah, how do you apply for it?
So it's pretty much like Ben said, it's still a traditional pupillage in terms of you do your first 6 non-practicing and then you do your second 6 practicing. In terms of any differences, it's just that at the CPS you'll just mainly do criminal prosecution, so you won't do defence work, you won't do anything else unless you do a secondment and you can experience things. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I couldn't do a secondment, and that was mainly because a lot of chambers were going virtual. It was a lot harder to organise. And it just couldn't happen. But it is still a first 6 and a second 6, and then you are a barrister once you finish. So you can take instructions in your second 6 to do Crown Court and Mags Court work. So it pretty much works out the same way. You do get paid, you do get a pupillage award, which is still like your salary. And then once you qualify, you're then a Crown prosecutor and you still get your salary, as opposed to the self-employed bar where your instructions come and your money comes. In terms of the application process, for those of you who haven't applied before, I believe it's you upload, I think, your CV and your employment history into like the first section bit where it just asks you if you have the right to work in the UK and stuff like that. Once you complete that, you then get invited to do the civil service judgment test and the verbal reasoning test. If you pass those two tests, you then get to do the video interview, which is where you get 3 questions pop up on the screen and you have to answer them, essentially. And then if you're successful in that stage, you then get through to the final interview, which is a 30-minute written assessment, a 5-minute oral presentation, and then a panel interview for 20 minutes. And then if you're successful, then you become a pupil or a trainee solicitor with the CPS.
Perfect, thank you. And we'll go into more details about the application process and how to pass the test, etc., and how to prepare for it. So like I said, we have received a lot of questions regarding the whole process. So I'm going to pass it on to my co-host, and they will address the questions that we have received via email, via direct messages, and through the live chat right now. So Chili, you can take it on from now.
Yeah, so I've got some questions that I've got out from the chat function. And the first one I've got is, if I can pass this over to you, Jade, and it's, what is the application process like applying for the CPS legal trainee scheme? Is it similar to applying for pupillages on the gateway?
So I don't think it's similar, but it's not similar for applying pupillage on the gateway. So I believe, so just to let everyone know, for instance, I applied for the CPS pupillage and I got it first time round. And because I got it first time round, I didn't need to apply for pupillage gateway like I was meant to. So I applied once and got pupillage the first time. So I'm familiar with the mock interviews for gateway, but I don't know as much because I haven't actually done it. I didn't need to. But from what I know, the gateway traditionally has those 5 or 6 questions that they all ask you. It's about 200 words each or 250 words each. And then once you submit that, they do a sift. You then have a first round interview if you're successful, which may incorporate an oral assessment, like a plea mitigation or a debate or something like that. And then if you're successful in your first round interview, then you get a second round interview, which again may incorporate an oral assessment. I think in some situations a written assessment. They have a lot of different types of questions that are a bit odd to make you think on your feet. And then they make their offers to you at the end of the recruitment cycle. For the CPS, as I said, you have the main parts of it is the situational judgment test and the verbal reasoning test. The situational judgment test is basically what it is. It's where you get, for instance, civil service situations and they ask you what you would do if you were in that situation. And it's mainly to test your behaviours to see if they're in line with the civil service and what they are looking for in that position. If you pass that test, then you will do the verbal reasoning test. For those of you who haven't done it, it's kind of where you get a block of text. It's unrelated to law. It could just be anything random that they pick out, and then it answers you whether it's, they ask you a question and you have to pick whether it's true, false, or you can't tell or something like that. And I think that's the trickiest part from what I've heard. A lot of people slipped up on the verbal reasoning test because it is quite different. It's not law related. It's just common sense, as they say. So if you pass that, you then go on to the video interview. The video interview was where you have to log on to a system kind of like Zoom, and there's a question that pops up on the screen. I think they give you about 5 minutes to think about it. They give you 5 minutes thinking time, and then they give you 2 minutes of presenting it. It starts recording and you can't re-record. So whatever you say is what gets submitted. So that's why they do give you 5 minutes worth of thinking time. And they can ask you any kind of question, from a legal question to like a competency question, like a time where you've demonstrated this or that or something like that. And it's 3 questions in total. If you pass the video interview stage, then it's the final interview. And a week before your interview slot, they will give you a topic to research. So my one at the time was the Extinction Rebellion protest, because I think that was really alive at the time. So they will give you a topic to research within a week. You can take your papers with you, or at least I got to take my papers with me. Once you get to your interview, it's a 30-minute written assessment. They'll give you the question. You have 30 minutes in a room by yourself to write your answer. Once you finish that, your answer gets given to the panel, and then you have 5 minutes to basically kind of deliver your written assessment plus anything else you wish to say. And then they ask you some legal questions, and then they ask you, it's your interview, they ask you mainly competency-based questions, which is your interview. So that's the process in full.
Yeah, so I did both Gateway and the legal trainee scheme. So essentially, I applied to quite a lot of places because, you know, it's pupillage. If you apply to one place, that's really hedging your bets. So it was a case of there were chambers that I really liked, did really nice applications for. There were chambers which I'd never heard of. There was one which I clearly filled in late at night on the Gateway deadline day. I realized I thought it was in one city and it was in another city, but I realized that afterwards. I was like, oh, that's not getting that one. But yeah, so in terms of Gateway, because Gateway essentially, yeah, you fill in like three. There are a few answers you fill in, and that goes into like all of them, and then they'll ask a few sort of more tailored questions for that chambers. Similarly, some chambers on Gateway, it's a bit different. In terms of the legal trainee scheme, it's a bit more like how they are for doing training contracts. I mean, I've never done training contracts once, but I have friends who have, and from what I've heard, that's more like it, the way you do sort of written tests and you have the video interviews. With regards to the video interview, the questions I have written down, which were why the CPS, why the legal trainee scheme, and what is one time you have learned a skill useful to a career at the CPS, when have you used the skill and what was the result? As said, you get that question, you get like, it says you have 5 minutes as a timer on screen. The best way I find to do it is you start thinking about, you start to write down ideas. It's good to have notes in front of you. And then because you have like 2 minutes to answer, I like to do like a little 2-minute practice run so I can just iron out the kinks before, you know, it shows up saying, give your answer now. But yeah, you get one go and you can't re-record it, which is frustrating. But and also in fact, it's probably a lot better training now because it's good training for virtual courts. Whereas that I didn't know that would have to be a concern at the time. And then where in terms of well, I'm not sure they do the in-person one in person currently. I don't know how they're doing it. But my one for that was about disclosure in like rape and serious sexual offense cases. And so I think the way they do it now, as Jade said, is you get like a week to research. Then it wasn't. You got a piece of paper with it and they left you alone for an hour and then you had to come in and give a presentation. And the interviews are quite different because it's more sort of, so when you're applying, you can find like there's a list of like civil service like values they look for and stuff, and they're not hard to find. The CPS have them when you're going to apply for the legal trainee scheme. So if you read through them, have them in mind, so you've always got things to sort of like, oh, this is the kind of thing they're looking for. Whereas when you go to pupillage interviews, I did quite a few in a variety of places. They're weird. They ask you strange questions. I've been asked, like, if you were invisible for a day, what would you do? And the things like, should murder and attempted murder carry the same penalty? Will Liverpool win the league? I got asked that twice in bar interviews. I said yes, we didn't get either of those jobs. They obviously knew something I didn't. But yeah, so it is different, but there's definitely some overlap in terms of the kind of things that you get. And honestly, with interviews, they're weird, and the more you do them, the more you get used to them. The more genuine you get as well, because I do feel like with these things, it always helps if you're yourself. And the first few times you're worried about it, you're putting on a persona. And as soon as you start coming through a bit more naturally, it helps you.
So tell us, Ben, what would you do if you were invisible for a day then?
I think my answer at the time was I'd just go and sleep somewhere, because at the time, like, I had an exam like the day before, and then an exam like 2 days after that interview. So I was just like, I'd go to bed, to be honest, and just like want no one to disturb me.
I think I would agree to that. Yes, Chili, go ahead.
I've got another question about the entry requirements for this scheme. Would someone with a 2-2 be eligible? And if you could just give us a brief summary about the entry requirements, that's to any of you.
Not sure off the top of my head. I know that it'll say when you're applying the minimum. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it does lay it out for you on the website when you go in to fill it in.
Okay, thank you. Jade, do you want to have an input on that, or?
Yeah, I think it's like Ben. I'm not too sure. I want to say the answer is yes, but I don't want to say that, and I could be wrong. So I think check the website just in case, because I'm not too sure, but it should tell you what the entry requirements are.
I've just looked. It does say minimum 2-2, so 2-2 is good.
Okay, and then I've got another question here, and it says, how long were you seconded for? And can you experience other areas of law? And if I can give over to you, Ben.
Yeah, so I was seconded for exactly a month. I did family, civil, and a bit of defence work as well. So I did days in family courts, which family court is wild. Like, honestly, I've spent time in criminal courts where there are people who have like assaulted people, and they're calm when you get them in the dock. And then in family courts, you get like two hardworking professional people. You throw a child in there, and then suddenly they're at each other's throats. It's crazy. Civil, I did some shadowing trials and things. It was good as well because, as I say, I used to work in personal injury, so like I knew quite a bit about that. And seeing defence was useful as well because now I know a few more of the sort of defence barristers in the area, and like they know me a bit more. So it's nice to get that around. It's good experience. It does vary because you get put with barristers. Some are lovely and helpful, and then some don't really know why you're there, which is the same as you'll find in pupillage in general. Really, being with people who are helpful and want you to like get the most out of it, they're the best people to be around, and that's why your supervisors are great because they're people who've like signed up and gone through training just to prove how much they want to support someone. So
thank you for that, Ben. And then I'm just going to give over to you, Benedicte, if you've got a few questions.
Yes, so these are sort of questions that were sent in before the actual event even started. We received a lot. So this is about sort of the employed bar versus the independent bar. So I think I'm going to ask Jade first. So was the employed bar always the route that you intended to pursue?
For me personally, yes, it was. I think, as I said in the beginning, being self-employed is great, but it really did scare me. For many reasons. I think first of all, when you're self-employed as a barrister, you have to do your own taxes and that. I can't do that because I can't do maths really and truly, and the thought of having to keep on top of your financial taxes just scared me, so I decided to avoid that. I think also because as a self-employed practitioner, obviously the more instructions you get, the more you earn. And I just kind of felt not like I would obviously do like a bad job and not get instructions. It's just there was so much pressure for you to obviously have to stand out, take anything that came your way because you needed to earn your name and to earn your pay. And I think obviously at the employed bar, you get instructions every single day because you're in court every day, you'll get cases every day. So there wasn't that pressure. As well, like I said, because I'm a female, I'm 26. And I'm not looking to have a family now, but obviously in the future, I was thinking if I did want to have kids, how would that affect my income and how would that affect my stability? So I was thinking that the first few years of practice as a junior tenant in anywhere are the most important because you need instructions, you need solicitors, you need to get work. And if I was to have a baby after I got pupillage, then that's a year out that I would have to take, and I would essentially lose instructions, I would lose a lot of work. And I would feel so much pressure just thinking I have to come back to work, I have to get everything together, I don't want anyone to forget me, and I would have to kind of rebuild everything again. So I think for me at the employed bar, it was just better because I get maternity leave, I get maternity pay, I can come back to the same position, a stable job, stable income, and I can obviously work flexibly. So I could go part-time, I could go full-time if I wanted to, I can work from home, etc. So I think for me, that stuck out for me. So, and I liked the, like I said, the stability of having the same salary every single month. I knew what was coming in my bank account. I knew how much I wanted to save, and I could work my finances out. So I think for me, the employed bar is better. And obviously starting off at the employed bar doesn't stop you from going to the self-employed bar. So if in a few years I did want to go to the self-employed bar, I can. Alternatively, if I wanted to come back, etc., and keep jumping, I could do that. So it doesn't limit you where you start. You can always go back and forth. So you do have the option.
Ben, would you like to add anything to that at all?
Yeah, so as I say, I applied for both self-employed bar and this. I went with the CPS, and I've got friends who are in the employed bar, so like I've always sort of kept a track of where they're up to and where I'm up to. One of the most enlightening things I had was a friend of mine. She finished her pupillage in Manchester, and then afterwards she ended up she got a job with the CPS for like a few months. I'm not quite sure how it all worked out, but essentially she was doing my job. But because she'd done her pupillage in Chambers, it was really interesting seeing her insight into things. As mentioned, stability of money, really nice. If you're saving, you know where your next paycheck is essentially, and you know what it's going to be, which is great for like, when you're looking at planning your life out. Also similarly with, for me with like COVID when that started, because so many hearings dried up because the court system sort of went into a half shutdown around May or something. And I was still in court and I was still in work, but I had friends who, because their work was drying up for defense and for counsel, essentially it went to the more senior end and they weren't guaranteed to be getting work all of the time. And the pupillage award isn't much for like most chambers. With the CPS, you've got, I think it's 25k out of London and it's slightly more in London. You're guaranteed that. So even if you're not in court, you're fine. And that's nice. And the global pandemic was a reassuring time. Also travel. So in the CPS, you'll be part of an area. You do a list of your priorities of areas, essentially. So I do Merseyside and Cheshire, which means the furthest I have to travel is Crewe, which is about an hour, which isn't bad in the long scheme of things. And this is the thing, because I have friends who I speak to who are in chambers, and they'll like get a case down in Southampton, for example, which is the other end of the country. They'll drive all the way down, and then something happens with the case falls through. You're not getting paid for it. You've traveled down there. Whereas if I go to Crewe, my trial cracks, I'm like, that's a minor inconvenience. Now I've got the afternoon to do nothing. I still get paid. I still know what is happening. So it does give stability. And as mentioned, benefits, things like maternity leave, paternity leave, grievances, illness, pension, those are all nice, really. And that's it. It was one of those things I always wanted when I was in second six, because I was like, if I'm going to break away straight away, it'll probably be end of pupillage. But by the end of my pupillage, I was having such a good time that I was just like, I'm just happy here. So.
Oh, thank you. And then what would you say are 3 pros and 3 cons of being at the employed bar? Obviously stability, pro.
Yeah, I feel like I've gone through most of the pros, so I guess I have to tackle cons. Cons, you have to deal with some like human resources crap, essentially. Like, you have management and things, and you won't always get on with it, and it is what it is, and you have to deal with like inputting stuff into HR systems. It's not always the easiest, but it is what it is. We're employed bar in terms of the CPS, because you do only do prosecution work, which does mean you miss out on defense work, and that is the whole side of the system, which is a shame. But third one, let's see. Trying to think now. It's probably a good sign I can't think of many off the top of my head.
How about we give you a minute and we'll see if Jade has the
Yeah,
three
that's fine.
got up.
I have to steal Ben's ones actually. Really, I think some of the cons are that as you're managed essentially, like you are your own prosecutor. Like when you do go to court, you do have your own autonomy, but you ultimately do have management and HR and things like that. And like you said, you don't get to do defence work. So at the CPS anyway, you just prosecute, so you won't get to do defence work unless you unfortunately leave. And I guess you don't get to experience other areas of law if you have any preferences. So I like employment law. That was one of the ones that I was going to go into had I gone to the self-employed, but I can't because I'm at the CPS. I do love it and enjoy it, but it obviously does limit what you can do. So you're just in that particular area. So I think those are some of the cons that I would say.
I've got my third one. My third one is when you're doing a case, because this happens sometimes where cases, through whatever fault somewhere along the line, the case hasn't been managed well and it's cracking and falling apart at the seams. And normally you can go, it's not my fault. But then you go, whose fault is it? It's the CPS. Don't you work for them? Oh, I guess. So technically, you can blame me for it, but
that's a good con. Can you like sort of describe what a typical day of a Crown prosecutor or a pupil barrister looks like? It's going to start with Ben and then go back.
Yeah, okay, so I'll run through essentially my week so far. So I start Monday in Liverpool Remand Court and the Magistrates, which is essentially, the Remand Court is everything that's fresh in. It's people who have been arrested the night before, people brought in on warrants. It's a melting pot. You're getting the cases as they're being called on, essentially. It's madness. Sometimes you get like 5 minutes to read through a file, which is terrifying when you start, because I remember like my first court when I sat up all night reading every single page of every paper because I was nervous. But that is it. After a while, you are amazed with what you can do, and you can read a case in 3 minutes and be like, yeah, I'm good with this. I can get on with it. So that was Monday. Liverpool Remands, busy, very full on. Tuesday, I was doing a court from home, which is still quite strange. So that was just dealing with a bunch of sentencing matters. Today, I was working from home, which is nice. We are now at a good capacity where we tend to have one day at home, like just doing whatever you want to do. So you can either be working on stuff that you have on or doing like extra legal research and stuff. And that's really nice. Because it wasn't that way when I first started, but now we're at a good capacity. So I was reading for trials that I have tomorrow. However, halfway through the day, I found out, so what my morning all-day trial was discontinued. So that was out the window. And then the other one, they're going to plead guilty. So my all-day trial has turned into one sentencing in the afternoon. So I've got a very short day and I'm excited about that. And then I've got DV trials on Friday, which I've not yet looked at. So
sounds very packed. Jade?
So my typical days, so I started at CPS Southeast. So like Ben said, you get to choose where you're located. I started out at CPS Southeast, which was covering Guildford, Kent, Surrey, Sussex, and I luckily got to transfer to London because I lived here, so it was a bit closer for me. So it's just different. In Southeast, I was in court maybe 3 to 4 days a week with 1 day working from home, either preparing the cases that I was going to do for the week or doing casework review. So advising police whether they should charge or no further action or get some more evidence for me to charge it. So that was my typical day in the Southeast. 3 weeks in court, 1 day review, 1 day prep. In London, it's just ridiculous. Yeah, I'm in court 5 days a week and I love it. I do like it. It's crazy the way it's organized because London is so busy. Everything is rapid and it's wildfire, which is why if you like advocacy and you like being on your feet, it really is the place. I don't know what courts I'm going to be doing until like 4 p.m. the day before. Therefore, I don't know what cases I'm doing until 4 p.m. the day before. So I don't know if I'm going to be in a gap court, an end gap, or a remand, or a trial court. I don't know what I'm doing until 4. And then I get like 20 cases dumped on me to prepare. So my typical day is literally going to court on a Monday, having found it on a Friday, doing that case list, and then I come home, depending on what time court finishes, 5 or 6, and then spending 2 hours prepping for the next day. And I just do that all the time. So for instance, on Monday I can be in a guilty plea court, which is a bit simpler because they should all plead guilty. I could do an NGAP court, which is not guilty pleas, which is where you do case management, special measures, bad character applications, any legal argument before the trial. Wednesday, for instance, I could be doing trials. Thursday, I could do a remand court, which is where people have come in, have been arrested overnight, and they've been brought before the next available court, or they've been arrested on a warrant and they've been produced, or they've breached their bail. And then on Friday, I could be doing another remand court. So for me, I'm in court every single day. I don't get a prep day like Ben does. I don't have the one day working from home unless I'm doing training, or unless I've been given an allocated case, or unless I've been put on standby, which is where they've got enough people and I may not need to go to court unless someone calls in sick, and then I will need to just go to court. So yeah, my day to day is kind of every day in court at the moment.
That sounds crazy. Before I just pass back to Chili, I just read a follow-up question from what you were saying before. So you both mentioned how sort of you can't do defense work. So somebody said, so can you not still work outside of the CPS? So for example, on weekends, do pro bono or stuff that sort of like still legal work, but not necessarily CPS related. Jade.
I don't know. I think I replied to that person and said you might have to ask your manager, because I'm not too sure. I think, for instance, one of my friends wanted to volunteer either through or advocate on the weekends. I think she's asked her manager whether she can do it, and she's authorised that she can. I think you just need to disclose it to your particular manager and get authorisation for you to do that, just so there isn't a conflict or anything. So I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's something that you just can disclose, and they can give you further information as to whether you can or whether you can't, or what limits you might be able to do. But what I do also know is that I think they have this scheme where 3 days in a year you can volunteer anywhere of your choice. So that might be something that you can also do. But if you do want to do it more regularly, then I think just disclose it to your particular manager, and they should give you authority on what kind of rules you might need to follow.
Yeah, that 3 days a year thing. So that's 3 days a year where you get paid that you can just take off to go do volunteering work. So you could, and it can be, it doesn't have to be law. You could do it in, a lot of people did it for the COVID pandemic. Like when there were things like getting out and getting deliveries to people who couldn't get out of the house. You could go do that, and like it was just treated like a thing that you could do, and that is cool. It's cool.
Chili?
Yeah, so I've got a few more questions. Someone asked, just for a bit of advice, what do you think about doing a gap year for financial reasons and to plan throughout the year to have a productive year between graduating from the law degree and starting the bar course?
I honestly, like, this is the thing that for me, because I did from my degree into the GDL, and then I took 2 years, which were really good because I'd sort of rushed right into law. I didn't know that much about it, so I got more time to learn about law and about thinking more about what areas I was interested in, start looking into like how the bar works, so like beyond just getting on the course, what chambers I'd be looking at, those kind of things. And it is good to take the time out, and for me as well, I couldn't afford it, so I had 2 years to save money. The problem is paralegaling tends to pay crap, but there are ways that you can make it work for you, and I managed to save enough money so that combined with my I took the master's loan to do the BPTC as a master's, which also didn't exist the first time I was going to go and do the BPTC, so that was lovely that I could now get a loan. So combined with that, I was able to afford somewhere to live and do the course, and that was great. And I do think it's good to take time out. Also, you have more stuff to talk about, because especially if you've gone undergrad law straight into the bar course, you've got less things that distinguish you. So like taking more time out and being able to draw on experiences, especially if you've worked in law. So if you get a question in an interview and you're like, oh, I've dealt with something similar to that, because you can find that even if I worked in a different field of personal injury, but I still found ways to sort of tie it into what I was talking about.
Thank you. Jade, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree with Ben. I think taking a gap year doesn't disadvantage you in any way. It gives you time to kind of just think about what you want to do, what kind of route you want to take, save up, because the bar isn't cheap at all, and all the associated things that come with it. So like I said, I finished my law degree, then did a master's, then I worked for a year, and then I did the bar. And I think just taking those years out from doing the bar just helped me really understand what I was getting myself into. I think personally, had I gone straight into doing the bar from like a law degree, I wouldn't have coped, because it's much more intense and it's much more practical than I thought. And I think similarly, if I had jumped straight into applying for pupillage, it just would have been tough. So I think doing a gap year helps you do things that you enjoy. They don't necessarily have to always be legal. Because having different skills that are transferable will help you just as much when it comes to the application stage, so you have more things to talk about. When I worked in recruitment, it was non-legal, but it had so many skills that I was able to put on my application and use in the interview process that I think it really helped me stand out. As you said, for finances, it really does help you, because as you said, the bar is not cheap. It's 18k when I did it. I think it was 19,050 actually when I did it. And then obviously I had qualifying sessions that I had to pay for. And because this was pre-COVID, I was obviously going into the inn, paying for my mixed message and my moots and stuff like that. So I had to pay for things like that. I had to obviously pay to get into uni and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you want to do a gap year, then I would suggest doing it, because there's a lot of things that you can do in that gap year, use in your interview. And for financial purposes, save as much as you can, just so you have enough funds if you don't get a scholarship or you don't apply for a scholarship.
Thank you. And I've got another question. Ben, if I can direct this to you. In your second six, were you mostly in the magistrates court or the youth court?
So yeah, so it was a split really. So at the very start, I was only in the magistrates court, but towards the end, I was doing 3 days magistrates, 2 days in the Crown Court. Essentially, after I'd started, I had a chat with my supervisor. My supervisor was she does only Crown Court work. She's like the area lead for rape and serious sexual offences. So she does really high level stuff. And she switched some things around and made it so that I was doing a bit of both, and it was really good. Another thing I'd say, just because I've been reminded of it on my supervisor as well, is there's cool opportunities you'll get from stuff like that. Like I did, I can't remember, it was about 4 months into my pupillage. My supervisor just like called me up on a Friday, and she had a case that she'd done sentencing on, essentially because it involved possession of indecent images of children. It became like a media thing with the coverage of it. So they've been raised as a review by the Attorney General as to the sentencing and if it was too lenient. So she was like, well, I've been asked to draft this for the Attorney General. So do you want to draft this for the Attorney General? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then that became my weekend. I didn't really get to go out, but it was also like one of the most exciting things I've ever done. It ended up he didn't want to listen to the appeal, so it got wasted, but it was a great experience. And yeah, and that's an opportunity as well, which I wouldn't have got to do in chambers. It's more of a unique one. Similarly, I had one where we had to go and ask the chief crown prosecutor for the region about opening up. Essentially, this was like seriously historic sexual abuse allegations. So they're from like the 1970s. I was asking about, can we reopen these? And that was a cool meeting to be in. I just sat there and took notes. I didn't get to say anything, but it was very exciting. That was because I was only about a month in. So getting opportunities like that, which are just a bit different, are great.
Thank you, Ben. I've got another question here. There's been quite a few questions about international students. I'm not sure if any of you have got any advice on that. So there've been questions asking if there's an alternative route for international students that want to do the scheme. If anyone can have an input in that.
In terms of international students, because I know there are things that they have in with regards to language requirements. I think they're laid out on the website when you go to apply. I don't know what the situation is with regards to visas. I imagine they will have information. If not, there'll be a way that you can contact them. So if you have any questions, that they'll be able to get back to you.
Thanks for that, Ben. And if I can direct this one to you, Jade, do you have any tips about researching for the written assessment? Will this be a broad approach or a very specific research topic?
I don't know, because I want to say it should be a specific topic. So as I said, my one was on Extinction Rebellion, and they specifically asked me to research the law into prosecuting public order offences and the available offences and whether it would be in the public interest. So I want to say it would be like a specific topic, like for instance, knife crime, hate crime, offences against the person, sexual offences, specifically rape or sexual assault or something. So I think it will be specific enough for you to get everything that you need. I want to say I don't think they will give you a broad approach, because there are so many different types of offences, they can't really expect you to know everything. And because it's only a 30-minute written assessment, I don't think they would want you to research everything and then only end up writing a little bit. So I want to say it would be quite specific, and they will tell you what kind of law they want you to research. So if it's things like knife, drugs, rape, assault and stuff like that, I think it will be specific, but obviously I can't say for certain.
Thank you for that. Ben, have you got anything to add on that, or?
No, as I say, when I did it, I didn't get to research, so it was just the standard sort of trying to be on top of the news and things. And that's it. To be honest, that's advice for general pupillage interviews. Is if there's a big legal news story, they're probably going to ask you about it. And if they ask you something in an interview and you don't know about it, either maybe it wasn't actually as big as they think, or they've purposefully chosen something that's smaller. Just say, I don't know about that. Do you mind like telling me about it? Because you can still give an informed response about something, even if you've just heard about it for the first time. And it's better than pretending you know and just not looking good out of it.
Thank you. Benedicte, I'll just hand back over to you to ask a few more questions.
I was just making a note of that tip. That's really good, because I've been really struggling with like learning everything in terms of pupillage interviews. So if I don't know, I'll just say that. So there's quite a few questions about the video stage. So people are asking, can you advise how to structure the video stage? Jade.
To structure it, what I will say is that the video interview, like I said, is if it's the same way as what they will do for me, it's 3 questions that pop up one after the other. So it's kind of like this, you'll be talking to yourself, so nobody's actually there, it's literally you recording yourself, so it is a bit strange. There is a question that will pop up on screen, and I think you will get 5 minutes worth of thinking time, and then you will get about 2 minutes to answer it. So depending on the kind of question it is, it could be, why do you want to be a prosecutor, why the CPS, why criminal law, or something like that. Just really use those 5 minutes to think about what you want to say, and how to structure the question. Don't forget to actually answer the question, especially. And I know it's hard because you are recording yourself. Try not to like waffle on, and just be quite specific with what they're asking. What I did, which I don't know if it's cheating or not, but I minimized the little camera thing, and I had Word open in a different browser, and I was just basically typing notes on what to say, basically, and I basically structured my answer on Word and then just set it into the camera. So that's what I did, and it helped, because you are under pressure. You only get 5 minutes to think, and it's quite strange. It's a strange interview because no one's there. So I would just say, look at what the question's asking you. Don't be afraid to have like something like Word open, and just kind of scribble some notes about, this is why I want to do this, or, this is what I want to do that, and stuff like that. What I would also say as well is, look, as Ben said, look at the civil service behaviours. Just Google it and look at what they want. So for instance, on the advert, it will say they want behaviours like making effective decisions, working together, collaboration and stuff like that. look at those behaviours on the civil service behaviours, look at the kind of examples that they give. So they will say this candidate should do this candidate will be expected to do this is what we're looking for, and kind of incorporate those behaviours into what experiences you have. So when it comes, you're ready to give examples and practical examples of when you've done this, when I've demonstrated this behaviour, when I've been in this type of a situation, I'm interested in law because of this is what the CPS does, this is their role in the criminal justice system. So I think do an overall research of the CPS and their role within the criminal justice system, understand why you want to be a prosecutor and why you want to apply, look at the behaviours and have some examples ready. So when it comes to the video interview, you're kind of ready to go. So those would be my kind of tips for the video interview stage.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. It's not cheating to take notes, it's just being smart about it. Like if you just try and prepare an entire argument in your head, you wouldn't do it in court, so don't do it here. Yeah, that's my trick, is if you spend like about a minute just purely thinking, about 2 minutes typing notes, and then I always try and do a little practice run for the last 2 minutes, just because then you get an idea of how long what you're saying actually is, because you want to fill the 2 minutes. But yeah, and also it's not cheating to go and research something if it comes up on a video interview, because you've got the time.
Just a follow-up question about video interview. Is it better to provide short and concise answers to the questions being asked using the signposting method? Ben?
I think it can depend. It depends on what the questions are, because sometimes you might get a question which is quite, short and closed, in which case it might be better to be concise. Signposting is always good. It's good to, it's just good advocacy, and that's it. Because not only are they interested in what you're saying, they're interested in how you're saying it, because at the end of the day, what you're applying to be is an advocate. So if you don't sound good saying it, then the content doesn't really matter. So yeah, things like signposting, and that's why it's good to have written notes as well, because you're able to signpost if you're like, well, I'm going to say this, then this, then this. But if they give you 2 minutes, I think it's best to try to take up most of the 2 minutes. You don't want to run out of time, and at the same time, you don't want to just fill it with nonsense so it takes 2 minutes. If all you've got to say you can say in a minute, do that.
Jade, do you follow up anything?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think signposting is really important, because it kind of just lets them know what you're about to say, what you're going to say next, and what is kind of coming. So I think signposting is really good. I think being concise is also really good. Don't be overly concise and think that they will know what you're trying to say, and don't waffle, because sometimes, like Ben said, you'll run out of time and then you won't get to finish, and that's the end. So I think just try and structure it as best as you can. Signpost as much as you can, because that's obviously really helpful. Yeah, just try to answer the question in the best way you can, keeping in mind the time limit that they will give you to answer the question, and just try your hardest to obviously finish what you're saying, just so you don't run out of time and they don't get to hear the end of what you're about to say.
And someone's just said that they applied 3 times but didn't get through to the interview stage, the video interview stage. Any tips, Jade?
If you didn't get through to the video interview, then I assume that's because you unfortunately didn't pass the civil service situational judgment and the verbal reasoning test. What I will say is that I think, if I remember, there should be practice tests online. I can't remember if there were, but there might be. If you can, try and practice those ones. I think they might ask you some of the same questions again and again, so it might get a bit repetitive, but it will just kind of help with the sort of questions that they're going to ask, the sorts of behaviours that they want, just so you can align yourself. With the verbal reasoning test, as I said, that kind of trips a lot of people up just because of the nature of the test. I think, if I remember, I did a practice one that I think the CPS provided. If not, I'm pretty sure I Googled verbal reasoning test, and I think I did a free practice one online, just to get myself familiar with it, because it is a bit tough, but at the same time, like I said, it is also a bit of common sense, just because it's tough, but it shouldn't be overly hard. If you read the question and read the answer in the text, it does make sense. What I would also say is that I don't think it's timed, so don't put any pressure on yourself. I don't think any of them are timed, so do take as much time as you want, and I don't think that will be held against you. I spent quite a bit of time doing the verbal reasoning test because I was paranoid about how hard it was going to be. And I think that helped because I was able to read the question, read it again, read the text, then read the answers, then know what I was going to pick. So spend time on the test and don't rush them. Make sure that you're well prepared to do it. Allocate yourself like half an hour to an hour of your day when you are ready to take it, and make sure you're prepared. Do sufficient practice tests if you can beforehand, just to get in line with the format of the testing. And also, like I said, read the civil service behaviours, because that will help with this civil service situational judgment test, because it's really just what the civil service want and what they're looking for. So that would also really help.
Ben, want to add any tips?
Yeah, just because I think in terms of resources, I think there are just general aptitude testing practice ones you can find online. If you know any solicitors or people who are going through training contract things, they normally get these all of the time because all of the law firms do them for reasons beyond my understanding, because I think they're a bit pointless. But yeah, so they might know good places to find example ones because they'll do them a lot.
And just this is about interview as well, so I thought I would just do that. So it says, please could you talk about the assessment part of the trainee scheme, i.e. the final round interview? Ben, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so the final round, I think it's different now because you get the week where you are given a topic and things. So when I did it, you showed up, you got put in a room, they gave you a piece of paper which said, like, it said, this is a thing that's happening in law. I think for me, it was something about people like having to give their phones over in cases where there's allegations of serious sexual offences. And it's the fact that people are always asked for their phones. They don't necessarily have to give it, but it's about being asked for it and whether that was morally right, wrong, etc. So I got, I think, half an hour, maybe an hour to sit and read that and then write loads of notes, gave a 5-minute presentation on it. Again, it's just about sort of structuring it, trying to get all the points you want to say, and making sure that you, because again, if you've got an hour and you know you're going to be doing it for 5 minutes, make sure it's going to be about 5 minutes. And I think you get asked a couple of questions on that, and then they move to the actual sort of panel interview, which is more like what you get from general pupillage interviews. And I think you normally have someone who works with like human resources, someone who's a younger Crown prosecutor, and someone who's like a senior Crown prosecutor. So you'll normally get a mix of sort of more legal questions, asking you about current things in law or about your opinions on certain things. You'll get questions about like why the CPS, why legal trainee scheme, why not the self-employed bar, sort of those kind of things. And then you'll get sort of more what I'd call aptitude questions, which are more targeted. And those tend to be based on the, you get, when you're doing the scheme, you get like a list of like values and things that like the CPS looks for, and it'll be stuff like that. So they'll be asking you about like decision making, and it'll be provide an example of a time that you showed decision making. My general tip for those sort of questions is always just whenever you have examples for things, it's a much better way of showing your point, because it's all well and good to say, I make great decisions, but you want to show examples of that. And also one of the big parts as well for the CPS is going when times you've had to make like hard choices. So any times you've had something and you're like, okay, I know that this is a right thing to do, but all of these things have been saying not to do this, but I've gone ahead with it, and I think it was like the right decision, because those are the kind of decisions you're making on cases every day. So those things are valuable. And again, it all boils down to be a good advocate, do all of the things that you learn in making submissions. They're valuable and everything. So always keeping eye contact, being slow, signposting your answers, when you've got, always linking back to the question, and always sort of end by wrapping up and linking back to the question, because those are the things that make convincing advocacy.
Thank you. Jade, did you want to add anything?
It's pretty much like what Ben said. You get your topic a week before, you'll get to research it, and you can, I believe, bring your papers with you, which really, really does help. And then you get put in a room, you have 30 minutes to write your answers to your question. Once that's done, you'll then go to the interview, and there's a 5-minute oral assessment, and then there's follow-up questions, and then there's the actual interview. And like Ben said, it's really competency based, so they really do want practical examples of when you've showed a skill, or when you've done something, when you've been in a situation, how you've demonstrated a skill, and stuff like that. So have those ready to give. Make sure that you've got examples that you can demonstrate, which is why, like I said, a gap year will help, because you'll have a lot more to say and demonstrate. So I think those are my tips. And just try your hardest to not be as nervous. The panel were all really, really lovely. They do ask you legal questions, so please do keep up to date with legal affairs as well. I will say that. I think I got asked a question about like a legal topic that happened and why I found it interesting, and me, like an idiot, I completely forgot to like read a newspaper before I got to my interview, because I forgot they were going to ask me questions like that. I don't know why. So then I basically said the topic that you gave me is what I found interesting, because when I was researching it, this is what I found out, and it worked perfectly for me. So do keep up to date with current legal affairs is what I will say, especially in the criminal field, because that's obviously what they're looking for. Research the CPS as well. And obviously why you want to join, because I think they did ask a question like why the CPS, or why do you want to be a prosecutor, and it's a lot of things that are literally on the website that you can literally say to them and they will love. Like it's, you know, about being fair and open with prosecutions, it's being unbiased, it's seeking justice for people, doing it in a fair way. So it's literally things that you can just Google on their website and just have their values and their requirements, and those are the kind of things that they really do like in the interview, as well as your legal intellect. And don't be afraid to say you don't know the answer, like Ben said. If you need time to think, or if you don't understand a question, then just say that. I didn't understand a few questions and asked them to repeat it a few times, and it helps, just because if they rephrase it, it might get to you. Sometimes the way they phrase it the first time doesn't always make sense, so don't be afraid to just say I don't understand something. So yeah.
Thank you. Back to you, Chilombo.
Hi, so I've got a few more questions. So do you feel that you got so much more exposure to the court instead of if you were at chambers?
I think I did. I think it was mainly because of the pandemic, because there were times where, especially in my second six, where I wouldn't have been able to go into court because the work wouldn't have been there, but I was in work, because essentially when there were less courts running, it meant that we were keeping everything in-house, which meant there was work for me, but there wasn't work being briefed out as much. I don't know what it's like in terms of the getting into court for shadowing. I'm sure Jade knows more about that, because I know, I think it's eased now, but especially at the start, they didn't like having too many people in court because of the global pandemic. So yeah, I got, you know, I don't get many days where I'm not in court, and the days where I'm not in court, I'm normally preparing to go into court. It is, you know, you're doing it. And the best thing I can say about this is the first time you go into court and you do your second six and you're terrified out of everything, it becomes routine. Like, it does become where you get cases which are, you know, straightforward. You'll do like a straightforward drug driving case, you know it, you can read it in 2 minutes and you'll know everything you need to know, and that feels routine. And that's sort of the best stage you can get to, because when things feel like that, you feel comfortable and you settle and your advocacy is better and you're not worrying and you're not panicking, and you're like, I know this stuff, and you get confident that you know this stuff.
Thank you. Jade, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so for me, because I started literally just when we went into lockdown, I wasn't able to go to court basically at all until about August, and even then it was for like 2 days. So because courts were basically closing down at the time, I wasn't able to go. I was able to shadow at the Crown Court through CBP, which my supervisor organised, and again it was really helpful. And also it wasn't the best, just because being in court physically is just different from seeing over CBP, especially for me. Luckily, because I paralegaled with the CPS before, I was able to understand things a lot better. But in terms of magistrates court procedures, I didn't know much. I knew a lot more about the Crown Court than the mags, and I wasn't able to go to the mags until about August. And then in September was when I was in court about 3 days a week shadowing, because courts were now being opened. They were trying to facilitate having necessary people inside the courtroom. And so I was able to kind of shadow. And I know some of my friends who have just started pupillage with the CPS in November 2020, they're actually able to go in person now that the courts are opening more and they're making it more COVID secure. So they're able to go as much as possible. As with second six, I was in court a lot, because by that time, courts were trying to do social distancing. They were marking out where defence should be, where prosecution should be, where the defendant should be, where the legal advice would be, and I think there was like 2 or 3 spots for public or press to be in. So they were making it more accessible, so I was able to shadow a lot more in September, and also still be on my feet as well at the same time, so I could shadow, be on my feet, shadow, be on my feet. So it was better. In terms of Crown Court work, I wasn't able to do much in the beginning, because a lot of Crown Court work was being briefed out to external counsel, because the CPS are nice like that, and they obviously wanted to be there for their self-employed partners and give them as much work as possible. So a lot of work was going to the self-employed bar for Crown Court work, so I wasn't able to do as much. I've luckily hopefully got a few Crown Court hearings lined up towards next week and the week after. What I will say is that a lot of hearings, because of
I think we've lost Jade, haven't we?
Yeah. Just
Yes,
move on to the next question, because I
that
think
that for everyone, that is your experience of video court. That's what that's like.
Yeah, so I'll ask you the next question, Ben, until Jade comes back to join us. Have you come across a lot of mature students on the scheme?
Yeah, so I've seen quite a few. When I did the bar as well, there was quite a few mature students from various backgrounds, some of whom had done other legal work before, and some of whom had done other things with their lives. Yeah, I think you've got every opportunity, and I know a lot of the pupils and solicitors that they take on are people who have worked like in the CPS before and have done like a few years working in-house, being paralegaling or being a associate prosecutor or whatever, which is the non-legally qualified people who are allowed to do some hearings. And then there are opportunities for them. It's to be honest, I think it might be better than the self-employed bar for although you can get those opportunities at the self-employed bar. One of my friends who was 42 when she did the bar course, she's just got pupillage up in the northeast. So it's definitely a thing. And also, as a mature student, you have a lot more life experience to talk about in an interview than everyone else. So that's a nice advantage.
Yeah. I've got another question. So what happens after the scheme? Do you automatically get hired by the CPS, or is there another process?
Yep, you get guaranteed a job. Says it on the contract when you sign up. So you do 12 months, final day, next day, you're in, you get the paperwork. Yep. And then you get the bit of paper from the bar council that says you're a barrister, and that's nice to have. But yeah, it's you do get, they say from the get-go, you get a job at the end of this. So that's, again, another weight off your mind, because it's one of those things, like I have friends in chambers say about this, where they always say, like, essentially, unless everything goes drastically wrong, you get tenancy. However, you're still just worried in the back of your head, even if they've given every pupil ever a tenancy, you're like, what if I'm not the one? But yeah.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us again, Jade. Do you want to just finish what you were saying? I think you ended on you had some Crown Court cases lined up at the weekend.
Yeah, sorry, my internet cuts out because I've got my CPS internet at home, so it cuts out after a while. So yeah, I think getting into court, what I was saying about the Crown Court was that it's just been a bit harder just because of the pandemic. So a lot of work has been briefed out to external counsel to obviously give them support. And a lot of hearings because of the pandemic have just been adjourned by nature because defendants got COVID or someone's got COVID, so we've had to adjourn it. So I would literally prepare a sentence hearing and it will just be adjourned. So that's just been a bit harder. So I haven't gotten to do as much as I would like, but I've been able to do some. So getting into court has been different. They're trying to facilitate CBP a lot more for those who are vulnerable or they have different circumstances, situations. So they have been able to facilitate CBP a lot more to try and get people into court as much as possible. So they are trying to make sure that everyone has as much court time as possible.
Thank you. And I'm just going to give over to you, Benedicte.
So my next few questions are about the application process. So somebody asked, what type of experiences makes an attractive applicant? And somebody else mentioned that they have police volunteering. Would this be a good experience to have? Jade, would you like to answer?
I think for me, so I did a lot of volunteering before I applied. So I did a lot of volunteering through my LLB, like the Legal Advice Centre at university. I volunteered at my local community legal advice centre for about 4 years doing drop-in sessions with employment law. I then worked for a year in recruitment. And then when I did the bar course, I then did everything that they threw at me, like street law, vocalise, the employment law telephone advice centre, and tried to do things like that. Did mini pupillages, etc., etc. So I think those kind of experiences help. I think volunteering helped a lot because the CPS is obviously a public body. They're a civil service department. They're a public body, so they do like commitment to public service. So I think that really helped. Not like doing experience at a law firm will not help, it will definitely help, but I think they liked commitment to public service by volunteering. So I think those experiences will help. I think if you also have other things like advocacy, like mooting, etc., that will also help because it shows that you can be on your feet. I think if you also have other real life working experiences, like if you're paralegal, for instance, if you have worked even in a non-law department, that helps because they have a lot of transferable skills. They just want to know that you can communicate with people, you know how to understand information, you can digest information, you can relay it to a court, to a bench, to a witness, to a vulnerable person. Have you worked with vulnerable people before? Have you worked with people from different ethnicities? So in court, you a lot of the time have defendants who are unrepresented. They don't know about the law. Not like you're there to advise them, but you do have to obviously explain up to a certain point things to them. So it's just about having experiences that show that you can handle being in a courtroom, you can handle being under pressure, you can handle being sent to court last minute and having to take on several cases at the last minute, and experiences like that will really, really help. And I think somebody said something in the chat before it cut out about they worked in a different field, like commercial or conveyancing or something like that. I don't think it's detrimental to you. I think working in different field can have its advantages as long as you can show it's transferable and you do have a genuine interest in working with the CPS as well. So all of those experiences I think will definitely help. A lot of my experiences came from employment law, and I was still able to show transferable skills. So I think anything that's legal and that's also real life working experience, just working with people, are really good experiences to show for the CPS because they really just love communication, working with other people, and stuff like that.
Ben, do you have anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, I think that's the thing is with all sort of thing for its past experience and stuff is it's what you do with it. Like it's how you say it's good. That's what makes it. Because, and this is the thing, because you'll get talk about you know, mooting that you've done, things like mooting, things like going through law school, mini pupillages. Pretty much everyone's going to have done those things, and those are essential. But you know, most people have done them. Having other stuff that you've done, which is different, if you can really sell it as why it's useful, that really helps. Because like advocacy, for example, you do advocacy in mooting, but you do advocacy in other things in life. Like, you know, you do it when you've ever done a talk for a business or something, if you've done like careers events. So I always also taught, when I was in my sort of 18 to 20 range, I was in a very bad band in which I used to sing. I always talk about that, is that I'm definitely not afraid of being in front of strangers and making an idiot of myself. But you know, you talk about those things and how you use them. Similarly, someone said like retail assistant. People who work, if you're working in shops and stuff, or like, I mean, I had a mate who talked about like how he used to work in Mackey's. Won't find a more stressful job. That's more stressful than being in court. So you can talk about that. You know, you're used to having people like in your ear, people shouting at you, people doing things, and you're used to working with strange people of the public. It's all just about how you justify it. It's about saying, I've done this stuff and this is why it's good for the job, because you can get something out of anything. And similarly, like when you talk about your past experiences in law, it's not just saying I've done them, it's saying I've done them and I did this specific thing, I dealt with this problem, which I think is really good for it. Because working in like employment law, for example, you might have come up with similar tricky situations that you'll deal with as a Crown prosecutor. And it's saying, you know, it's not the same thing, but I can apply this to this. And it's a big part of it.
Just a follow-up question. You did mention, you know, everyone would have had minis by this point. Are there such thing as like sort of minis that are like catered to the CPS, or any sorts of work experience that you can do that's specifically CPS related, similar to minis are for the pupillage chambers type thing?
Not that I know of. I do know they do some work experience, but I think the work experience tends to be aimed at younger people. So like it's normally that they aim it at people in the sort of 16 to 18 range to help them. I think you can also organize it with the CPS, but yes, in terms of formal things. But in all fairness, if you do any criminal mini pupillages, those are great experience, because chances are you'll follow some work which is instructed by the CPS, and it's quite similar to what you do.
Jade, anything to add to that?
No, I think, yeah, it's like Ben said, they do work experience, but I think it's more tailored to younger students who are kind of going to university or thinking about an apprenticeship. So it is a bit harder to get in-house with the CPS. But if you do any kind of, like they say, any kind of criminal mini pupillage, then it will kind of be the same. If you do things like marshalling and stuff like that, it will just also help, because you just get to see how prosecution counsel present and things like that. And if you do get the opportunity now to go into court, then you could obviously have a word with prosecution counsel and stuff like that, because I don't think they do experiences the way they do mini pupillages. I think it's just a bit more harder for us to do, just because of the way the organisation is. It's a bit harder to facilitate.
And somebody did say, in terms of their legal experience, they tend to have it more in criminal defence. Will that make them at a disadvantage? No.
No, I know, like there are a lot of we've had in the past year, essentially, as I say, like our staff levels went from very understaffed to actually quite well staffed, and it's because we had loads of people who used to be in defence who have joined us. You do the same job on both sides, it's just different sides of the argument.
Thank you very much. Chili, any more questions?
Yeah, I've just got a few more questions. How many people or number of people do they hire each year at the CPS, and do they hire each year?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I know when I started, I think they said thousands applied. And I can't remember how many people they interviewed. I think it was about 100 or less than that they interviewed. I'm not sure the exact figures. In terms of how many people actually got it, I remember on the advert it was meant to be 25 places, and they were for both pupillages and training contracts. So it was kind of, they did it on merit. So if 20 people did really good and those 20 people wanted a training contract, you got a training contract. If 20 people did really good and they all wanted pupillage, you would get pupillage. So it's just based on merit, and the path you go down is what you get. I think on the app, on the advert it did say 25, but from what I know, there's 27 pupils in my cohort, and there's also about 20 solicitors that started in November as well. So I do know that in a couple of occasions they've exceeded the amount of people that they intended to take on, and they've accepted them as much as possible. So I believe it will say so on the advert how many people they take on, and in certain years they have exceeded the amount of people they've actually taken on, because there were so many people met the criteria. And this year, for the first time, they're looking at 2 pathways, so you can start in 2021 or 2022. So I believe that will give them the capacity to take a lot more people as possible. And then obviously when they recruit again, they may open it in the same way and recruit for both years, so that will give them a lot more people to take on.
Yes, I don't have much to add to that. I don't know the precise figures. The only thing I will say about this is every pupillage statistic is really, really depressing. I'm sure you've all had it hammered into your head by now. There are a lot of people and there aren't that many jobs, and that's a shame. The one thing I would say is, especially, I was lucky. I got in my first round of applying, but I did a lot of bad interviews, and I did a lot of interviews where I really thought it went well and I never got the job. I literally got, the CPS was the last one I did, and I got that, and I didn't have to do another year. But I went to bar school with people who were far smarter than I am and far better than I am, and they didn't have any luck in their first years, but have found that they've some of them have managed it this year, some of them managed one starting for next year. So don't be disheartened if not everything goes right, because some of it's luck as well. You know, some days you'll do amazing, but there'll be a better candidate who just kicked it out of the park, who did it after you. And sometimes you're not the right match, and sometimes, you know, you might have interviewed great, but they didn't really like you, but they didn't like you because they're crap and you wouldn't enjoyed working there anyway. It's hard to know, but the thing is, just try and don't be disheartened, because you can keep going, and that's it. Lots of people get it in their second and third year. The more interviews you do, the better you'll be at them. You know, when you've had time out from it, if you've been working while you're applying, you know, you're getting more and more experiences to talk about. Every year you're making yourself a better candidate, so just keep going.
Thank you. And if I can come to you again, Ben, at first for this one, a big part of the self-employed bar is the close-knit nature of chambers. Is that the same for the CPS?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit different, because I know if the self-employed bar, it's more about, because you don't work as closely day to day, but they do more sort of events, keeping everything together. For us, it's more when I go into the court, which is just up the road from me. When I get in the morning, I'm sat there. We have like a CPS room in the court, and you know, I'll have a few people who come in and chat to me who I know because I see them pretty much every day. You also, because you're not being spread across the country, you're in the same courts, you get to know defense better. You'll meet more defense solicitors and you'll get to know them. You'll know the legal advisors better. You do get that. In terms of other things within as well, like, because I think it mentioned about like sort of opportunities from that. So we do like area legal newsletters. I used to write them every month. I gave up because I just didn't have time for them anymore, but I did do it every month before then. And there are those opportunities, and you'll make friends. You will. Yeah, there's, you know, you're seeing the same people all of the time, so you do get to manage to make friends. And also you'll do circuit events too. So I do stuff with the Northern Circuit up here, where I'll meet barristers from around, and then you get on better terms with your local bar as well, which is nice.
Would you like to add to that, Jade?
Yeah, it's pretty much like what Ben said. When you go to certain courts more often, you will just get familiar with certain people. So I'm now in London, so I'm mainly in Bromley, Bexley and Croydon at the moment, and may go to Westminster when the pandemic gets better. But because I'm in the same courts, I'm with the same prosecutors a lot, I'm with the same legal advisors, the same list callers, the same ushers, and it's just really friendly because everyone's really nice. They're all really, really helpful is what I like. And the one thing I love doing is complaining about things sometimes, just because why not? And it's just nice going into the room and complaining about a bench or a district judge that's annoyed you, and they will just agree with you. It's just a really nice sense. If you get a really good list caller, you can make friends. It makes it so much easier. So for instance, yesterday I had to do a witness summons application that I didn't want to do. The legal advisor did it in the judge's absence. It was over in like a minute. It was great. So when you get more familiar with people, it's just really nice. And the same thing with defence solicitors. They're not all against you. Some of them are difficult, some of them are not. But the more you go to the court, the more you see these defence solicitors, the more you actually become friendly, as in they'll always have a discussion like, do you want to drop this, what's your view on this, we might want us for an adjournment. And it's not a battle, it's literally just you doing your jobs, and it's nothing personal. So it is really nice. And again, because you are a part of the bar, you will be against other barristers in court. I've been against barristers who were called when I was born. I've been against barristers who are still pupils, and it's just all really nice. And it's just really nice talking to other people, especially other pupils, about how their pupillages are going. When did you start? When did you finish? How has it been in the pandemic? What's it like? So you will make a good circle of friends in your area in the CPS. It has been hard because of COVID. I haven't met a lot of people except the people who are in my particular courtrooms a lot. But yeah, you do get to meet a lot of people, and they do make you feel really comfortable. They are all really nice.
Thank you. And I've got another question. Is it true that you're understaffed and overwhelmed by the work, as the press say? So I'll start with you, Ben.
I think that describes the entirety of the criminal bar. Just as a warning, criminal bar, there's not enough resources, there's not enough money, you won't get paid for what you do, you'll work a lot of hours, but you should know those things. But the thing is also, I adore my job. I feel like I'm doing a public good. Right now, our staffing situation's actually pretty good. You work a lot of late nights, you do. It's what it is. But, go into that with eyes wide open. But I adore my job, and I am really passionate about the stuff I do, so I don't care, to be honest. But yes, the press have a strange relationship with us.
Did you want to add anything to that, Jade?
It's literally just like Ben said. The criminal justice system in general is just going through its toll right now. There's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot of pressure in both the self-employed bar and the employed bar anyway. There is a lot of backlog. We're doing our best to clear it, so that obviously does mean sometimes working a bit later, working a bit harder, and you have a bit more of a caseload than you probably normally would have. But we're literally doing the best that we can, which is why with the CPS, we do brief external counsel to obviously help as much as we can. We do have advocates who are literally in court 5 days a week, and we have the review team who do reviews 5 days a week. So we're obviously trying to make sure that all advices are giving charging decisions, cases are reviewed after they've been into court to make sure that they're trial ready, to make sure disclosure is dealt with, to make sure defence get their answers. And we have advocates who are in court every single day, just making sure that all the cases that are in court are heard. We're trying to not give as many adjournments as possible so we can deal with things in one go, because every day that gets taken is another case that doesn't get heard. So yeah, we're doing the best that we can. It's those situations in the criminal bar.
And someone wanted some advice. They said that they've applied and got through to the second stage, but since they've not heard back, and they've emailed them and still not heard back, is there any advice that you've got for them what to do about that? And this could be anyone. Have you got any advice?
The second stage of the process, I assume.
Yeah.
How do they mean? As in, like, they've applied last year, or because it hasn't opened yet, or?
Yeah, I think they probably mean they applied last year but didn't get a response.
Oh, sorry, they should have. They definitely should have given everyone a response, whether you got in or not, because that's what's expected of them. If you didn't get a response, there should be an email. I think it's the CPS recruitment team. There should have been an email that you can email to get a response back. If not, also check the civil service website, because I think once you send your application, your status comes up in the civil service jobs bar, and it will tell you the status of your application, whether it's being reviewed, whether you've gone to the next stage and what's happening and stuff like that. So do check that. If not, there should be an email that you should be able to email. If that's also unsuccessful, then do unconventional approaches, find somebody who works in HR on LinkedIn and just kindly say, I've applied, I haven't heard back, can you just give me an email address or someone to go to just so I can inquire? And they should hopefully be more than happy to help and give you a person to contact. If that's happened, then on behalf of the CPS, I'm really sorry, that's something that shouldn't happen. So hopefully that won't happen this year and you will get a response.
Thank you. And I've got another question. I know you've briefly spoke about this earlier, but what experience is quite attractive for the application process, would you say, or makes you stand out for the particular scheme? If I can start with you, Ben.
So again, I am a big proponent of you can make anything work. I would say a big thing with the CPS, one thing that I really leaned on, because the CPS is quite different from the bar, because you are from the bar in general, because you end up being a civil servant, you know, you are part of something sort of bigger in the community. And for me, that was something I really leaned on. So I applied. My first choice was Liverpool. I interviewed in Liverpool, and like, I'm from Liverpool, I've grown up here, I adore it, it's like a big part of my identity. So I leaned quite hard on that and talking about sort of my ties to the community, sort of voluntary work I've done, and showing that I was very passionate about that, and like tying that into the CPS and talking about, you know, it was great to have that feeling of something bigger, because not only is that touching on why is the CPS different to the general bar, but you're also showing like, you know, you're used to dealing with loads of issues, difficult situations, those kind of things. So for me, that was a nice sort of way to show why the CPS particularly, as well as showcasing some of your like skills and things. So I think having ties to the community and work in the community is really good.
Thank you. And I've just got one last question for you both, and then I'll just pass back over to Benedicte. What's something you wish you knew before you started? Start with you, Ben.
I was just having a type of my answer to this. My main thing that I wish I knew when I started, and it's something everyone tells you, but you don't believe it, is just everything gets easier in those senses. The first time you get any case and it's like 500 pages and you look at it and you're like, I don't know what any of this means. That gets simpler. You start to know, you pick up a file, you're like, okay, I need to look at the MG5, I need to look at this stuff, I need to look at the reviews. You know, you're targeting what you're going through and you get your process down. You're like, I can read through a case quite quickly to pick up what I need. And that's it. And suddenly doing a list of 20 cases in a day is like, oh, that's all right. Whereas at the start, it was like, oh, this will take me all night. Those things get smoother, they get more straightforward. And similarly, in my first 6, the first time I followed my supervisor into a Crown Court trial, I was like, I have no idea what's going on here. And I didn't. But by the end of my first 6, I would sit in a magistrate's court and I was bored, because I was just like, I want to do this. And then I got to do it. And it was terrifying, but that got easier too. You know, everything just picks up, everything gets easier. Even when you think it won't, it does.
And what about you, Jade? What's one thing you wish you knew?
I think one thing I wish I knew was to probably just believe in myself a bit more. Obviously, it sounds strange because obviously you kind of get pupillage and you think that's it, but it's just like Ben said, I was literally up prepping until like 12 at night, just terrified about what was going to happen in court. And then I would literally prep all these cases, and then I would get into court and half of them would be adjourned, people just don't turn up, and all of that prep had just gone to waste. So I think it's just probably about just managing your time a lot better, and just understanding that, you know, things are hard, but like Ben said, it will get better. There are people that have joined the CPS that have come from the civil side, and they've come in saying that I know absolutely nothing about criminal law, but I still got the job. And they're making it work. So I think it's just about just really believing in yourself and your abilities and your capabilities, and just organizing your time, and yeah, just not being too hard on yourself, really and truly, because this job comes with so many things. You will get beaten up one day by a district judge or a magistrate or a legal advisor, and you can't go home and cry. You just have to wipe it off because you've got something to do tomorrow. So I think it's just about knowing that not everything is your fault. If a case comes to you and it's badly prepped, it's just what am I going to do? I don't have the time. So just really learn how to be calm and collected, and just know that not everything, you can't do everything. So yeah, those are the things that I wish I knew, is to just not spend time looking at things that I probably won't even need to know by the time I get into the courtroom.
Thank you. Benedicte, have you got any more questions?
Yes. So this is like a really general question. It's not necessarily CPS specific, but we've mentioned a few times how you need to sort of keep up to date with the legal research and what's going on in the world, and you might be asked about anything. How do you do that? What sources are available? What do you need to do, basically? Ben?
Yeah, so a lot of it is just the news. There are more specific sort of like legal news sites you can go to. There's things like Crimeline, who, although you have to pay for their to actually get their updates, you know, they're on Twitter and things. Oh, Twitter also. I got Twitter just so I could follow barristers, and my entire timeline was full of barristers, and I'd look at things and they'd be tweeting about things and I'd have no idea what any of them were. But you know, you'd look at stuff, and whenever there was a hot button issue, suddenly, you know, you could see loads of barristers tweet about it, and then suddenly you'd be like, oh, I need to look into this. And also you get quite remarkable people who have good opinions on these things, so you're like, you can read their opinions, and then you're suddenly a lot more informed than you would have been on your own. But a lot of things are just things that are in the news cycle in general, especially if you're doing chambers work. So if you're looking at barristers' chambers, you want to look at like local newspapers as well. So any cases that they might have been on, essentially. Also, not for the CPS, but for chambers in general, you'll get, normally they'll have like a news page on their websites where they'll put out any media of cases that have been reported on. Local newspapers are good because, yeah, you know, there's normally they're trying to make a scandal out of something. So it's good to know about it. And also you'll see the kind of work, you know, you might be expected to do on your feet. But yeah, I recommend Twitter just to follow everyone. Follow barristers' chambers, and from there you'll find barristers, and from barristers you'll find other barristers, because you might not know any off the top, but as soon as you follow some, you get a sort of network, and then you'll find good sites for like getting news in general. Thank
you. Jade, did you have any tips?
Yeah, just the same. So I'm one of those people, I don't like reading newspapers, unfortunately. I don't really watch the news either, unless my parents are with me. I just don't do that stuff anymore. So for me, keeping up to date with legal affairs was things like Instagram, like honestly following Legal Cheek, and following like meme pages, because sometimes they would actually report on news. So I would follow those, read the blurbs, and then go research it myself if I liked the case. Things like Ben said, just Twitter, follow people like The Secret Barrister, Joanna Hardy is really good. Follow some people that you like, and they will have their views. They will tweet links to cases and things that have come out. LinkedIn is also really good. Follow, like you said, barristers like Mary Pryor QC is really active on LinkedIn, so follow people like that. Follow chambers, follow other resources like the New York Times and stuff like that. Keep up to date. I think keep up to date however you like it. If, for instance, you don't like reading newspapers like I do, just don't do it, because it might not stick in your head. So don't force it. Just do it the way that you find helpful to you, whether it's just Googling something, which is where I found a lot of my news. On my iPhone, when I press Google, when it comes up with like the top 3 news cases, I will click on the one that I want to read. So that helps me. What I would also say CPS specific as well, is look at cases that CPS do. So on the CPS website, I do believe at the bottom or somewhere there's like a scrolling thing of cases that the CPS have just done that's really important, like a murder or a rape or something like that. Click on it, read it, and see what's happened. Follow the CPS on Twitter, because they do tweet a lot of cases that they've done that are in the news, have got media attention. So read those cases, because a lot of those things may help at the interview process, just for something to talk about as well.
Thank you. And
yeah, on that note, follow Max Hill, TPP. He's useful as well as the CPS.
I'm just writing that down. So what's the difference between the traditional pupillage route versus the CPS legal trainee system? If you guys know. Ben, would you like to start?
Yeah, it's largely the same. You get, as I say, you get your first 6, second 6. There's more out of court work you do, like charging, that you wouldn't do otherwise. Similarly, you might get very specific opportunities you wouldn't have gotten with regards to sort of how cases are made behind the scenes and the sort of big processes of those. In terms of what's different from the usual pupillage is you don't, chambers and the CPS, we've talked about it, it is a bit different in terms of the feel of it. I like how the feel is, but it is different. You obviously you can't vary it in law as much. You don't have to worry about clerks and stuff because your work, you just get a steady stream of work. Similarly, you don't have to worry about being nice to solicitors firms, so they give you work. So those are sort of the big differences. You don't have to worry about doing your taxes. That's nice. So yeah, but in terms of the stuff you do every day, largely the same. Also, yeah, you have an area, you're not having to travel out of it, and you're only doing prosecution work, obviously.
Thank you. Jade?
Yeah, like Ben said, it's mainly the same. You will have a first 6 and you will have a second 6. A few differences will be things like you will just be doing prosecution. You will get to do behind the scenes things like charging advices, so you will understand how cases are charged, how they come to the CPS, who authorises the charge, what evidence we need to gather and stuff like that. So you have conduct of charging a case if you've been given one. You may also have conduct of a case from start to finish sometimes. So I've been in situations where I've charged a case or given the police authority to charge a case, and then I end up finding it in my case list in a couple of months' time when it comes to court, and I have conduct over what happens in court, and then it goes to trial, and then I will be dealing with the trial process, the witnesses, disclosure, all these kind of applications and stuff like that. So you will do a lot more with those kind of things at the litigation side than you would at the self-employed. Also, a few differences are that they're kind of the same. As a junior barrister at the self-employed bar, you will be in the mags a lot, and similarly with the CPS, you are in the mags a lot. The only difference is that maybe in the Crown Court you may get to do a bit more at the self-employed bar. And for instance, I can do committals for sentence and bail appeals. I can't do things like PCPHs, which is a plea and trial preparation hearing, and I can't do a neuting hearing or an appeal against sentence. Whereas at the self-employed bar, you may get that opportunity to do that. So those are the only kind of differences, that there are some things that you might not be able to do just because of the organisation itself, as opposed to your ability, that you might get to do at the self-employed bar, because at the self-employed bar, you can just kind of do anything. So those are the kind of differences that you might come up with.
Just like sort of a follow-up question. Are you able to, like, if you went through the CPS training scheme and you'd realize, oh, I don't want to do this, could you join chambers and back and forth? Is that an option, Jade?
Yeah, it's an option. So once you qualify, you qualify. You get your practicing certificate from the BSB, and you can you have your rights of audience. If you want to join the self-employed bar afterwards, then of course you can. A lot of people have left the CPS to do a third 6 and to join the self-employed bar. Some people have just left the self-employed bar and come to the CPS, obviously following the pandemic. So you can do that perfectly well. I know a lot of Crown advocates who have gone to the self-employed bar and vice versa, so you can absolutely do that. I know a lot of people asked before previously when I was talking to people about how do you do that jump, because obviously, like I said, at the CPS you just get your instructions, you don't need to worry about making friends with solicitors or clerks. So then how do you go to the self-employed bar and start getting those instructions in? You just kind of go and you will get given the same amount of instructions that a junior tenant will get, or a person of your particular year of call or expertise. So if you've been at the CPS for 10 years, but you've prosecuted cases from like minor drugs to rapes, to sexual assaults in the Crown Court, to multi-handed attempted murders, those are the kind of instructions that you will expect your clerks to get for you at the self-employed bar, because you have that experience and you have that on your CV. So it's not too different. It may just mean that you will start prosecuting a lot more than you will defend, because you haven't had as much defence practice, and then once your defence work gets better, then you will get more defence instructions. So it's definitely possible. You can change if you want to, so you're not stuck in one particular area.
Thank you. Ben, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, as I say, I had a friend who did this comment with the CPS shortly after finishing her self-employed, and I know people have gone the other way. It is that, you know, at first you might struggle to get some work because you'll be known as a CPS prosecutor, but you've got clerks, they'll help farm you out, and you'll have a lot of experience to show the work you've already done. And to be honest, if I was in defense instructing, I'd want someone who knows how the CPS work anyway. So yeah, I think you're not disadvantaged. Your main disadvantage would be if you're going into other areas of law, you'd find that harder. But I know that that's happened too, where barristers do start taking up some family and civil work, because to be honest, it's no different than how you do it in your second six of pupillage anyway.
Thank you. And this is just a question for Jade, because I'm sort of interested in this, because me and Sara, we both did a master's and obviously had to fund our own BPC. I was just interested in, how did you do yours, if you don't mind me asking? How did you fund it?
So I luckily had my parents help me fund it. So I remember working and saving up as much money as I can to kind of like live off. So that really, really helped. And then I had my parents luckily help me fund some of it. And also living at home helped, because I didn't have to pay rent. So I just had to kind of save up for money to live, save up money to get to university, and save up money for qualifying sessions. So that was very, very helpful for me, being in that kind of situation. But I know for other people it's different, and everyone's situations are different. So if you can apply for a scholarship, then definitely do, because if people are willing to pay for it, let them just do it. Work if you can. It is hard, but try and save up as much as you can. And if you can do an LLM with it and you can get some of the funding, that's also really helpful. Look at your university provider, because they do offer their own scholarships as well. I think some of them are only part, like 3,000-5,000 or something, but every little helps. So those are the things that you can do. But I luckily lived at home and had my parents help.
Okay, thank you. Chili, do you have any more questions at all?
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions. So if you've done, then we'll pass back over to Sara.
Lovely, thank you. I do have one question actually, and I think it was not addressed. And I'll direct this question to Ben. So I asked Jade about this question, but I don't know if she's got back to me on this. So I know within the CPS you can obviously you deal with criminal cases mainly. I know there is a complex case unit. I know there's the extradition team. How are you able to move about from just staying in the crime cases into these areas of law?
So yeah, I know that in pupillage, because there's a complex case unit here, they work quite closely with the police when there's things like drug raids and when there's big firearms conspiracy. I had one in my court a few weeks ago. So I'll deal with their cases in court sometimes. You can go and do stints in their unit. It's a bit more complicated. I think they struggle when you're in pupillage because you need security clearance for them. Because it's high level stuff. You get a base level of security clearance when you start with the CPS essentially, and then for certain things it needs to be upped. That's one that I think they think it's a bit risky in pupillage, but then afterwards it's somewhere you can go and work. in terms of extradition, I know that you can do secondments to extradition when you're in pupillage. I know some people who have done that. And some people do their pupillage in extradition as well, actually, but that's all they do. And they do secondments to normal crime. So yeah, there are sort of in CPS opportunities, and as well, I think, because someone mentioned earlier the government legal department, I think in the past there have been some sort of opportunities for people to do secondments to government legal departments, as well as who have then moved on to work there and vice versa. I think that's it. It's a big organization. There's a lot going on. I did like secondments going and doing fraud work as well. And yeah, so it's a big organization. You can find different ways. And similarly, you can get jobs in different areas as well, if that's what you want later on.
Lovely, thank you. Jade, do you want to input on that? Because I know you said your friend works in the extradition team.
Yeah, sorry if I didn't get back to you. I think I forgot. So yeah, like Ben said, you can do internal secondments. You don't always have to do them externally if you don't want to. You can do it internally because there are different CPS departments. So my friend did a month, I think, in extradition unit, specialising in their advocacy and their review work. You can also do internal secondments to RASO, which is rape and serious sexual offences. So you can do internal secondments with them and specialise in high-level rapes, high-level sexual assaults, youth sexual assaults, and those kind of cases. I think one of my friends is also doing a secondment, she said, in the fraud unit, where she's doing a lot of high-level fraud casework, and she's doing that for, I think, a month. And we were just informed that we could, if we wanted to, go to the Attorney General's office to do a secondment there. So you can go to different civil service, to different CPS areas, and you can also go to different civil service areas as well. So you can do them internally. So all you have to do is just really ask your supervisor, let them know your intentions beforehand, that this is something that I'm interested in, can I do this for a month? And they'll organise it for you. It's really quite simple. They'll get the relevant clearance for you so you can do that. And those are the kind of things that you can do internally, so you don't always have to do it externally if you don't want to.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So this is the wrap up. So thank you so much for attending, Ben and Jade. So we can reach you on social media. Is that okay for everybody to follow you on Twitter and LinkedIn and you know, bombard you with messages? So can I just get a yes?
Yes, you have my consent.
Fantastic. Again, you guys have been wonderful. This was extremely helpful for myself, for the attendees as well, and I'm sure for the co-host. And thank you again for dedicating your precious time. Just to remind everybody, this has been recorded and it will be posted soon on my social media accounts. Again, thank you so much for attending and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.